too. Why do I always get the weirdos?
Five Nights at Freddy's is obviously a huge horror franchise these days. Books, comic books, and of course video games, and me being a huge fanatic of horror gaming, you would think I would at least know a little bit about Five Nights at Freddy's, but I don't. So when they announced the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, I was actually really excited because I know the basic concept, I know the basic premise that it's animatronics coming to life. And to me, that just sounded like a great concept for a film. Now, obviously, Willy's Wonderland already came out and I love that movie, but I really thought I would like Five Nights at Freddy's more. So believe it or not, this may have been the horror movie that I was looking forward to most this year, and I know that might sound really depressing. But I just watched it on Peacock and I'm about to review it for you guys, give you guys my first impressions after having watched it one time. I was supposed to see this movie 2 days ago in theaters. I actually pre-ordered tickets to see it on Thursday the 26th, one day before the worldwide release. But of course on that day, every theater around me shut down, so I had to wait a couple days for it to be released on Peacock. So I wanted to get this video out early, but unfortunately it's out now a day after the movie came out, so I doubt anyone's really gonna watch this, but I still want to talk about it. But before I get too in-depth in my review, consider subscribing. Like I mentioned, I love survival horror video games, and I talk about it all the time on this page. Yesterday, I released an Alan Wake 2 review. A couple days before that, I released a Stray Souls review. And one thing I'll say right now is that the world of Five Nights at Freddy's based on this movie intrigues me enough that I am very interested in the games, and I very well might play them for the very first time very soon. And I'm debating if maybe I should make a video about that, about me playing them for the first time. Let me know if you'd be interested in that, but I also talk about horror movies, I talk about TV shows, I do trailer reactions, but the vast majority of everything that I do leans towards the genre of horror. But anyway, let's talk about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. There will be some spoilers here. I'm not going to get too in-depth about the plot, but just, you know, fair warning, some spoilers. But anyway, I was very much looking forward to this movie. Based on the trailers that I saw, based on the posters that I saw, this movie looked like it was going to just be a fun time. Did I think it was going to be a great movie? No. Did I think it was going to be a staple of the horror genre, or even the comedy horror genre, or even the kids horror genre? Maybe the latter, but mostly no. But what I thought this movie was going to be, at the very least, a fun time. I thought this movie for me was going to fall into the same category as things like Halloween Kills or maybe Cabin at the Woods. I don't love either of those movies, but I love watching them. They're just movies that I love watching on crisp fall nights with popcorn and just having a good time, just turning your brain off, knowing that you don't gotta think too hard, but you'll have fun. In the first 30 minutes of this movie, I thought I was going to get exactly that. This movie does do a lot of things good. For one, I really love the colors of this movie. I know it's kind of a weird thing to praise, but the visuals just pop. There's a lot of color on screen, and also the audio in this film is just very crisp. I usually have my TV at the same volume for whenever I watch movies, but I actually had to turn it down quite a bit for this movie because the audio was just mixed very loudly, and that's not me complaining, that's a good thing. And Josh Hutcherson, I was really excited to see him in a new movie because I don't really know what he's been up to these days, but obviously he's a staple of my childhood, like I'm sure he's a staple of a lot of your childhoods if you're in the same basic age demographic as me. And Matthew Lillard, obviously I'm a huge fan of the Scream franchise, I'm a huge fan of the Scooby-Doo movies, and it's just very exciting to see him in a new horror movie in 2023. And both of them give a really good performance. Actually, this might be my personal favorite Josh Hutcherson performance. His character I found to be very compelling. And they gave him, in my opinion, a pretty interesting backstory. Vague spoilers here, but when he was a kid, his brother got kidnapped, and he's been holding on to that guilt a lot. And he's now responsible for raising his sister, who's a lot younger than him. And he gets a job at Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria, and he's trying really hard to be a responsible adult and take care of his sister properly, while his aunt threatens to take custody away from him, all while he's dealing with the inner demons of feeling responsible for his brother's kidnapping. And obviously, like the vast majority of main characters' backstories, we learn as the plot progresses that it ties into the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's. And that plot to me is interesting. That backstory to me is interesting. It was enough to make this main character compelling instead of bland. But unfortunately, for some reason, the powers that be that made this movie decided to make that backstory and that plot be the main focus of this film. And they really, really just struggled with the ratio. It really should have been, in my opinion, 30 to 40% plot and then 60 to 70% fun. That would have been a good balance, where you have just this fun horror movie with a character that's compelling. But instead, and I'm not exaggerating here, it's about 80 to 85% plot and 15% fun. And that to me is just so disappointing, because I really wanted to love this movie. I really just wanted to have fun. And again, based on the first 30 minutes of this movie, maybe 40 minutes, I thought I was going to have that fun. But by the time the credits rolled, I had already tapped out about 20 to 30 minutes prior. And I just was left feeling just very disappointed. But don't get me wrong, there is still a slight amount of fun to be had in this movie. For example, when the animatronics come to life, I was enjoying it. I thought it was creepy, and it didn't bother me that it was PG-13. I wasn't expecting this to be a bloodfest, but there is a decent amount of kill scenes in this movie, and they were pretty gory for the most part. Not like blood gory, but just like disturbing when you think about the reality of it. But one of my biggest critiques with this movie when it comes to the narrative is that, in my opinion, it takes too long for the main character to be involved in the horror that's happening at Freddy's Pizzeria. He's not really introduced to the horror until very late into this movie. And the way that he's introduced to it was just very unsatisfying to me. Because you have him being the security guard. You have him looking at the monitors. You have him not taking the job too seriously, but every now and then being vaguely creeped out by his surroundings. And they really could have utilized that. They really could have pushed that more and have him be introduced to the horror slowly until he fully realizes what's happening. And now I'm going to say a spoiler that happens pretty late in the movie, so fast forward about 30 seconds if you don't want to hear this part. But when he's introduced to the horror, it's in such a quick way, and then the characters of the animatronics are introduced to him. Obviously, he's horrified at first, but then he ends up having like a slumber party with them, and that's pretty disappointing to me. And us as the audience, when we're first introduced to the animatronics as being these killing machines, it's through the eyes of these four characters that we don't really care about. It's a really cool sequence, and I like seeing these people die one by one. But again, I just wish that we were introduced to the horror through the eyes of the main character, and that our main character was introduced to the horror a lot earlier than he was. But at the end of the day, I feel like I did enjoy this movie more than most people. Are fans of Five Nights at Freddy's going to like it? I have no idea, because I'm not part of that fandom. I have no idea what that fan base likes. And I have no idea how faithful this is to the source material, to the games and the young adult novels and the comic books. But I can tell you how I'm feeling right now. And despite all the criticisms that I just gave this movie, I'm still gonna buy the 4K probably the day that it comes out. I'm still gonna proudly put it on my shelf with all my other horror movies. Am I gonna have a good time watching this movie every year around Halloween time like I was hoping I would? Probably not, but I'm still gonna watch this movie, every 2, maybe 3 years. There's a lot worse horror movies coming out these days for sure, but at the end of the day, the biggest feeling that I feel is still disappointment. But again, like I've said a million times, there's still enjoyment to be had here. But anyway, there's my quick and brief thoughts on the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Have you watched it yet? If you have, let me know in the comments, because I have a feeling this is probably a divisive film. I have no idea. I haven't been reading what people think about it. If you hate it, I understand that. Let me know why specifically though. And if you love it, I would also 100% understand that. So let me know why you love it as well. Once again, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching, especially if you watch this far.